Hey there, friends and running fans. This is Amby Burfoot welcoming you to the latest episode of the podcast, Running, State of the Sport.
And this is George Hirsch, your co-host at Running, State of the Sport. In every episode, we talk to the smartest, most informed, most influential, and sometimes fastest runners on the planet.
This week, we're excited to speak with Lisa Weidenbach Rainsberger, who was the winner of the Boston Marathon 40 years ago in 1985, when she ran 2:34 on a hot day. In her long racing career, Lisa also won major marathons in Chicago, Honolulu in Japan, and raced in other countries, including Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. She was really out there, she raced a lot, and she was always tough.
And Lisa ended her career with a marathon PR of 2:28:15. And remember, that was 40 years ago when women's running was just beginning to find its stride. But before we chat with Lisa, let's take a look at the biggest recent running news. Amby, what have you been paying attention to?
Well, George, of course, we all paid a lot of attention to the debut of Grand Slam track. But I'm going to let you talk about that because you're more of a gentleman than I am, and I've got a few fairly harsh comments. What caught my eye recently was the 53rd running of the popular Cherry Blossom 10 Mile in Washington, D.C., where the latest fast-rising American female star, and aren't there a lot of them? Her name is Taylor Rowe, and she set a world record for 10 miles when she dipped under 5-minute pace to run 49:53. That's 49:53. Okay, it's not actually a world record because World Athletics doesn't have a record category for 10 miles. So it's a world best. But it was definitely super fast, an American record, and very, very impressive. In her previous race, Rowe also won the USATF Half Marathon Championship in Atlanta on March 2nd. She's a Puma-sponsored runner and a training mate to U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials winner, Fiona O'Keefe. So remember that name, Taylor Rowe. U.S. men also had a good day, running fast at Cherry Blossom, with Charles Hicks winning in 45:14 and Alex Mayer finishing just 1 second back. Switching over to the high school scene, this year's fantastic high school female athlete, Jane Hedengren from Utah, just ran 2 miles in 9:34:12, which is the fastest ever by a U.S. high schooler. It's even 4 seconds faster than Mary Kane ran a bunch of years back when she ran a 9:38 indoors and was turning heads because it just seemed that she was so incredible. Well, Hedengren's faster now as a high schooler, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see what she produces in the next handful of years, but we can hope for a lot. Well, here we go, George. It's time to talk about the Grand Slam track meet in Jamaica. What did you think?
Well, Amby, I came away with some mixed feelings, to tell you the truth. The athletes had to have been thrilled. The winners of the dual events, each athlete had to participate in 2 events and then they combined the points. But those who won those events, people like Gabby Thomas and Sydney McLaughlin, came away with $100,000 each. And Amby, you and I have been around the sport a long time. I don't remember athletes getting $100,000 for a single track meet. Marathons, yes, okay, but in track and field, that seemed like a real breakthrough. And so we've always talked about getting more money into the hands of athletes, and I think that happened. The crowds were disappointing, and given that this was taking place in Kingston, Jamaica, even more disappointing because Jamaica is such a hotbed of track and field. During the 3-day competition, the crowds never, I think, got over 5,000 on a single day in a much larger stadium. However, and I think this counts for something, those who came out were wildly enthusiastic. They were making noise and playing those horns that they do during track meets. They were having a great time. So let's say it's a learning experience for the organizers of Grand Slam. So what were your thoughts?
Well, George, as I said earlier, I'm a little bit harsher with this thing. I'm going to give it a 2.7 on a 10 scale.
Oh
And
my!
of course, it's good if some of the athletes, get $100,000. But that's, we knew that was coming. They had contracts. What we were expecting, or what I was expecting, was some kind of spectacular new presentation of the sport of track and field that would elevate the sport to a point where more and more people globally might start tuning in on their TVs. Because we all know it's about TV. You got to boost your TV audience or the sport dissipates. And I just didn't see that at all. I don't blame the announcers in Kingston. They just weren't given anything new to do, and they had much too much time to talk. So it almost seemed like my 2.5 hours was more talk than running. And I think Michael Johnson and crew are going to have to do some serious re-gearing to pump this thing up a little bit. And that's it. That's our view on the biggest recent news from the world of running. Now let's turn to Lisa Rainsberger, this week's guest on the podcast, Running State of the Sport. Lisa will be at the Boston Marathon this year because she is celebrating the 40th anniversary of her win at Boston in 1985.
After Lisa's victory in 1985, there was a 33-year drought for American women until Des Linden broke the tape in her celebrated 2018 win. Lisa also won back-to-back titles at the 1988 and 89 Chicago marathons. And wait until you hear her story about the Olympic trials marathons, which we'll be getting into in just a minute.
Lisa, welcome to the podcast, Running State of the Sport.
Good morning. It's nice to be here with you guys and to see you again. I'm looking forward to seeing you both in Boston next week.
So, Lisa, we'd like to begin by having you give our listeners a brief bio update on you, how old you are now, where you're living, what's your family situation, what takes up all the hours of the day after that morning alarm goes off.
Well, oh my goodness. You said brief. Now that's a problem because I'm never brief, but I am 63 years old now. I still run. I still loved the sport. I think it keeps me healthy. I have 4 kids, 5 grandkids. My husband and I, love to travel. We do lots of fun things, but more importantly, right now, I am coaching a high school. I just sold my club coaching company that I owned and founded for 17 years, and now just strictly working with high school kids and enjoying every minute of it. As a matter of fact, as soon as we finish this podcast, I am jumping on a bus, 2 buses actually, with 80 kids to a track meet in Denver.
Oh, wow.
That is a pretty busy day and life, Lisa. I didn't know about the grandkids. Congratulations on all of them. I'm going to take us right back to Hopkinton in 1985. I'd like you to not tell us about your entire race with the first question, but what were you, was Boston in 85 your first Boston? And what were you thinking that morning as you were warming up in Hopkinton?
It was my first Boston. And back then, it was a lot different. The race started at noon. And that morning I woke up and all of my sheets were at the bottom of the bed and I was dying from heat because if you go back historically, it was the second hottest Boston ever. At that time, it was the first hottest Boston, but it's had a warmer race since. But I just remember I stayed with a host family in Hopkinton, and I walked to the finish or to the starting line that morning and just lined myself up and just felt in all the excitement of the race, even back then. And gun goes off, and yeah, I remember. I just remember the first several miles just being so dramatically downhill, and I wasn't used to it. and just, worked my way through the race. Again, it was hot. But the thing that stands out most were the women of Wellesley, because back then they were not cordoned off and they created a tunnel. I mean, a one human width tunnel where, for that, half mile, they were just screaming and cheering, and it was so loud. And it was just that emotion. The adrenaline and just all of that is probably my most prominent memory of the day. And the second was just approaching the finish line and just having the thousands of people and, that accomplishment, that feeling right before it happened was pretty spectacular.
Let's back up a little bit, Lisa. So you talked about the downhills and that incredible corridor of sound in Wellesley. Had you set a pace for yourself? Were you just running with the leaders at this point? Were you running against the course, or how had you been approaching it, and where were you when you hit say midway with Wellesley?
Right. So a little fun story at the beginning. Dave McGilvery, which I'm sure we all know who Dave is. He was my boss at Saucony at the time, and Saucony was the shoe company that I ran for. And they had hired him, I think WBZ hired him, to wear a recording, like a little recorder or video thing on his hat. I can't remember what it was, but so Dave was supposed to run with me the entire race. He made it to 8 miles. And then he couldn't keep up, because I set out in a pretty fast pace, not knowing, what the temperature that effect was going to have on me. So I always tell people that, the very first job Dave McGilvery had at Boston, he failed. He failed to keep up with me. I went out way too hard in hindsight, but I was fit. I was ready. I had just set the American record in the 30K. I had won, several races, Cherry Blossom leading up to Boston. And so I just thought I was really fit, and, was very courageous at the moment to go out hard. But the heat, I mean, it was in the mid 70s, approaching 80 at the halfway point, because again, remember, we started at noon. And, but it became like a baton death march towards the end, because I was, fading. We didn't have all the gels and the fancy drinks and, the aid stations that, athletes are provided these days. But, it just became, get me to the darn finish line. It couldn't happen soon enough.
Lisa, so let me see if I've got this straight. You woke up in the morning sweating because it was so warm already. The race started at noon. It was hot. You went out fast. What did you say your IQ is?
Right? Okay, come on. Okay, so I've run 44 marathons, and that was number 3. So I think I learned a lot from this race that I was able to apply, because, again, you had mentioned that I won Chicago. The first year I won Chicago, it was hot. And I'm like, okay, I know what this feels like. So Boston taught me a lot, and I think it actually propelled, just the rest of my career.
So I love to get a sense of the feeling, because it is one of the great finishes in all of running. When you took the left on Boylston and up ahead of you, there was the big crew. Do you recollect what you felt at that moment?
Yes. Oh, fortunately, the finish line comes a lot sooner than it does now. So, because, Copley's a long way down the road. But it was magic. I knew that my support staff was waiting, my coach, my husband, my parents, they were all waiting at the finish line. And, it was just that at that moment, the discomfort turned off, the pain turned off, the doubts turned off. And it was just pure elation at that point, because the crowd just totally boosts you. I mean, until you experience, you have no idea what it feels like to have that, just that noise and excitement of, the Boston Marathon. There's nothing like it. There's no other finish line in the world like Boston.
I agree with you on that, Lisa, about the Boston finish line.
You know just what it feels like.
So you must have also been excited about the big winner's check that was waiting for you at the finish.
Oh, are you making? Yeah, right. Yeah, no.
Right.
This was the year I ran was the last year there was no prize money. And I think that's why at that time, a lot of athletes avoided Boston because other races were starting to offer prize money. And so I had a very nice bonus with my shoe sponsor. So if I had won Boston, I would get that bonus. So I knew for me personally, there was some money on the line. And so, I just took a risk and I thought, this is Boston. I don't care, about the politics behind it at the moment. And I went and ran it. And it worked out for me personally because of Saucony.
So I'm glad
So
to know that. I didn't actually know there were shoe
Yeah.
bonuses back
Oh, yeah.
then, but another good reason to run hard at Boston.
Yes.
I'm going to drop back some more, even before 1985. You weren't a elementary school running prodigy. You were kind of a prodigy in another sport, swimming. Could you tell us how you got into that and how far you got with swimming?
Well, I think we have the late Jimmy Carter to credit for my becoming a runner because in 1980, I was a freshman at the University of Michigan and I was on the swim team. I was a swim prodigy. My mom, had me join swim team because she was trying to get me tired. The pediatrician said I had ADHD, and which I totally understand. So she put me in a swim class at the age of 5. And I loved it, and then I, joined, the competitive swim teams and, swam all through high school and swam my freshman year at Michigan. And halfway through my freshman year, I was at an international meet in Texas at Austin when, I'm in the pool with, the Russians and the Germans and, all the international swimmers swimming. At the moment, Jimmy Carter announced we were boycotting the Olympics. And I was like 17 years old going, what the heck just happened? And so, after a few weeks of, just depression and trying to figure out the next step, I decided to go to a outdoor camp University of Michigan has. It's a biology camp and to get 8 credits over the summer because I didn't want to read about everybody else going to the Olympics. I didn't want to watch it on TV. I just wanted to go, off the grid and, just pile on some credits at school and then come back to start my sophomore year as a swimmer. But what happened is I started to gain some weight because I wasn't in the pool and, and there's this thing called beer and, I was like, oh, geez. So I would get up in the mornings at 6 o'clock in the morning and go for a run and then come back and start classes. And each day I would take a rock because I didn't know distance. I didn't know how far I was going. I would take a little rock and every day I'd run and I'd move that rock a little further down the road. And it was just like this little game for me. And so I think by the end of that summer, I was close to 10 miles in the morning by moving my rock. I'd go 5 miles out, turn around, come back. And I came back to start my sophomore year in really good running shape. And my roommate was on the cross country team. And so I would run with her in the mornings and I would swim in the afternoon. And my roommate was like, dang, girl, you're a good runner. You should just run. And so I was just, still swimming. I was still running. I was on a full ride swimming. And then it came time where my coach said, we got to do doubles. We got to swim in the morning and swim in the afternoon. I'm like, no, I don't want to give up running. So I just did a harebrained. I talked to the cross country coach and I said, Red is Red Simmons. And I don't know if you know Red Simmons, but he was he competed in the Olympics in 1936 as a hurdler. Anyway, he said, yeah, we'd have you walk on the team. No problem. So I turned in my full ride, got a work study job, a Pell Grant, and a student loan and walked on the cross country team. And
wow.
that was a big risk. I finally got enough courage to tell my parents. And that was a tough day because my dad cried. My dad was so sad. He immigrated to the United States. He lived the American dream, and there was nothing more than what he wanted to see me wear a Team USA uniform. And because he had sacrificed so much to come to this country. And by the end of my sophomore year, I was an All-American. I got my full ride back.
Wow.
And then I competed, cross country and track at Michigan the remainder of the years. And that's kind of how I transitioned from swimming to running. because of
So
Jimmy Carter.
about that transition, Lisa, what were the similarities between swimming and running, and what was very different?
Yeah, that's a good question. The similarities, I think, for me were the work ethic. I could train hard. And I think swimming taught me that, and it created a great engine. So for me, I had a really good cardiovascular engine already established so that it could just come over to running pretty smoothly. The difference was I was much stronger upper body than I was, lower legs. So I had to spend a lot of time in the weight room just trying to equalize the strength of my legs to catch up with the strength of my cardiovascular system. So I had to transform my body a lot. I had to lose weight, and, just had to strengthen up some lower leg muscles that were not developed. Um, the biggest difference is I would spend hours in the pool, and I could get a lot done in just 1 hour running, so I did not have to spend, an hour and a half in the pool in the morning and 3 hours in the pool in the afternoon. I could just go out, and spend maybe a 30-minute run in the morning and an hour run in the afternoon and accomplish the same kind of um, workouts.
So that, Lisa, that transition from swimming to running is really kind of interesting because, as you know, there aren't a lot of people who go in that direction. It gets even more interesting that you, shortly after college, I think, jumped out there and tried your first marathon. What was that about, and
Yeah,
how did you find it? What was good and bad in that first
right.
marathon?
That's a great question. That's a really good question because um, I ran the 10K in Houston at the NCAA's and, trained, in college and did really well there. And then it was shortly announced that they were going to have the very first women's marathon in the Olympic Games. Okay. Up until this point, the longest distance that women had was the 3K. Okay. We didn't have the 5K. We didn't have the 10K. We had the 3K. And you're like, what the heck? There's no 3K in the Olympics. There isn't.
Lisa, shortly after you began running in college, you made the jump all the way up to the marathon distance, which is quite unusual for a young athlete, female especially in those days. What was the reasoning?
It was the very first marathon in 1984 was being conducted. So even though I was a 5K, 3K, 5K, 10K runner in college, there wasn't that option in the Olympics for women at that time. So I thought, okay, I'm going to jump up to try the marathon. I actually it was my, junior year in college, and I had a whole nother year of eligibility, but I decided to jump in the grandma's marathon on a whim, and ended up running and qualifying for the Olympic trials. I ran a 2:35, and that was really based on 10K training. So I thought, man, this is pretty awesome. And I came back and, talked to my college coach, and she says, well, no, you can't run the trials because it will conflict with Big Tens. I'm like, well, wait a minute. So you're telling me I can't run the Olympic trials and you'd rather have me run the Big Tens. So I made another harebrained decision in my life, and I walked off the team and I turned back my scholarship back in. And now
My
I'm like,
goodness.
okay, what am I going to do now? Um, I reached out to a couple corporate sponsors, and I got full funding from the Kellogg Corporation, which is the company in Battle Creek, Michigan, where I grew up. And
Of
so
course.
they funded me that entire year to train for the Olympic trials. And so, I ran Grandma's as my first marathon, and then I went to Olympia, Washington, and ran my second marathon. And for 25 miles, I was an Olympian. and then
Okay.
and then the wheels fell off, and I think it's because I did not know how to fuel. I did not know how to hydrate. I mean, it was technically my second marathon, and I just ran hard. And Julie Isperding came up on me at the 25-mile mark, and that made me the Olympic team alternate.
You were fourth, and that
I
was,
was
of course,
fourth.
the
Yeah.
famous race in which Joni won, and then shortly after went on to win the first Olympic marathon for women. It was an historic event for sure.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. That has to be pretty disappointing, finishing fourth. But then you went and finished fourth again and again, Lisa. Come on. So, I know you're tired of retelling this story because I don't know anyone
Yeah.
who's been
Well,
through that. But tell us.
I know it's like it's kind of like a made for TV movie, if you ask me. Not being able to make the team in 1980, and then almost making the team in 84. 84 wasn't the hard. That wasn't. I mean, I didn't know any better. I thought, good golly, I got fourth. That's amazing, And so then I came back and won Boston, and so everything's tracking nicely. And then I'm training for the next 4 years, and 1988, Pittsburgh.
Yep.
And I'm in great shape. I'm like everything's good, and there's just three people that had a better day. I ran a PR. What more can I do? I ran my best time ever, but there were three people that were just better. So I decided quickly after that, okay, they're going to the Olympics. I'm not. I'm going to run Chicago. So Chicago went really well. Ran a huge PR in Chicago, won Chicago. And life is great. Life is good. I'm running professionally. I'm traveling the world. And so then I start, 1992, I'm working for those Olympic Games. And the trials were people don't know this, but the trials were supposed to be in Long Beach in May in 1992, right? That's where, the running, the committees selected that site. So in September, prior to that, in September, I was dealing with a pretty bad case of plantar fascia. And I thought, I'm going to take the month off. I'm going to get a shot of cortisone. I'm going to rest this foot. I'm going to go train in the pool. I'm going to give my foot a break so that I can get ready for the May Olympic trials. Well, mid-October, they announced Long Beach lost their funding. So they're going to put the Olympic trials January 6th in Houston, Texas. And I had just taken off a whole month of running. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got 2.5 months to prepare for my marathon. I just lost a month.
Oh,
And,
no.
and so I'm like, okay. So in my frustration, I go out for a run and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to work through this pain. I'm just going to make it happen. And on my first run back, I tear my plantar in the middle of the run.
Mm.
And it just kind of shredded off the bone spur on my heel. And it hurt initially. But then like 2 days later, I didn't feel a thing because I had removed the fascia from the bone spur and it just kind of like, I didn't feel it. So then I was able to resume training. I got things going. Things started to look well. But, at mile, 22, then there were 4 and then there were 3. And I wasn't one of the 3.
Oh, my
So
God.
that was the worst of all of the trials for me. And it was just really hard to take. But again, there were just 3 people better than me that day. And so I just, I just deal with it. I go home, I cry, I think about things I could have done different, but I march on, and then I figure out, okay, what am I going to run next? So I decided to run Twin Cities. I won Twin Cities. And, for me, my career does not boil down to one race. And collectively, I just felt I had 16 years of being a professional runner and triathlete and swimmer. And I got to travel the world. I was a little girl from Battle Creek, Michigan, the daughter of an immigrant. I was on free and reduced hot lunches. I was the kid who my coach had to buy my shoes for me because I couldn't afford it. And so for me to, go through my career and financially benefit and get to see so many places in the world and meet so many people. And, I got my, I just feel blessed. And so I am not boiling down my career to 3 Olympic team alternates. And we have forgotten to mention that I was also the alternate in the 10K. I got fifth. I got
Yeah.
fifth in the 10K. I got fifth in the 10K. That made me the second alternate. So, I did everything I could possibly do. And so that's my Olympic saga.
Lisa,
And
everything you
more than that,
asked to
Lisa,
do.
there are a lot of people out here, George and myself included, who understand what it means to perform at a high, high level for as many years as you did across 3 Olympic quadrennials and fourth place is an eyelash from third, but you were right there for a long, long time. And we treasure that. You also won so many other races. We can't begin to list them now. We're going to kind of move away from racing into sort of larger questions about the sport and your experience in it. I'm interested to know what your training was like back in the mid and late 80s and what you think you did well and what you think you could have done better and would do different if you were to start over today.
Yeah, I think I would have to start over today, definitely fueling during the races, fueling before practices, fueling after practices. We didn't have all the research that we have now on, electrolytes and, percentage of proteins, carbs, and fats. And so for me, I think the bonking effect that I felt in the later stages of my races were a byproduct of that. And I'm going to digress just a little bit. My daughter is doing research on that right now. She just completed her master's and she's going to work on her doctorate in Munich on sports medicine for females during the nutritional and menstrual cycles of their training. And so she's like an expert on it. And she always makes fun of me about, all the missing links that I had during my career. And, she reminds me that only 6% of research is done on women. And so she's going to embark her career right now to help female athletes. And I couldn't be prouder. So that would be the one thing I would change is that piece, but I didn't know any better. The thing I'm proud about is my coach and I discovered that I worked better on a 9-day cycle versus a 7-day cycle. And even part of my daughter's research is that females take longer to recover than males do. And so adding that extra day between my really hard workouts enabled me to actually get a higher quality training. The level of my training was much more quality driven, and because I had that extra day. So on a 9-day cycle was what we came up with.
So you've mentioned your daughter, Katie, and Amby and I do want to chat with you a little about her because she's had a really good running career in her own right. But before we get to that, just I want to talk to you a little bit about your coaching because you've coached now for quite a few years at different levels. And what have you learned about marathon running as a coach and over these years that you didn't know during your own career? You've already mentioned fueling strategy as one of the biggest changes. And what other things would you
Yeah.
say?
Well, the biggest thing is the shoe technology. What we wore, you and I, all of us, what we wore are what kids are wearing now as like lifestyle shoes, the old fashioned lifestyle shoes that have no stack height, no cushion, no support. So I think I even tried a pair of the new shoes on, that have a plate and the stack height of 40 millimeters. I tried a pair on and went for a run and I'm like, oh my gosh. There's a big difference in the shoe technology is in today's runners. Twofold. They help you run faster, and plus they help you recover and aren't beat up during some of the harder training sessions and high mileage weeks. So I just think it has propelled the performance times of our sport. And originally I was like kind of snarky about it. I'm like, wait a minute, that's cheating. I didn't get to wear those shoes. And so there was just this little bad attitude I had. And then I realized, wow, wait a minute. It has enabled many more people to break world records. It has enabled many more people to run fast and hopefully secure shoe contracts and, elevate the sport to a new level. So, now I kind of embrace it because I'm coaching kids who wear them. I see the benefits of them. And, the past is the past. And I hope people remember to celebrate just how hard it was for you and I to run in those horrible shoes back then. But now I think it really has, helped the sport.
So, since you're speaking as an old guard marathon runner like George and me, any thoughts on some of the other new tech, like the GPS watches? We've talked about gels and fluids, and
Yeah.
I don't even know what an aura ring is, but I gather people are doing sleep research and stuff like that. Any
Yeah.
thoughts?
All of that is what I've had to learn about because the kids I coach, my own daughter, just to stay up with the technology, requires a PhD degree. Um, one of the things that I have recently started to use for my athletes is it's called a lever machine. And I'm not plugging any product. There's other people that make them, but this is just the one that I particularly, have access to. It's like an Alter G. And what it does is it can reduce the amount of impact on foot strike. So you can train it, a percentage of your body weight, 65%, 70%, 75% of your body weight on recovery days. You're still running, your stride rate is still quick, but there's less impact on the treadmill when you're using the lever machine. The Ultra G is, pretty much the high end of the same, device, but it's, upwards of $40,000 a piece. The lever is like 1,500. And so, it's accessible. And, my daughter's boyfriend, Woody Kincaid, they travel with their lever machine and, it's just this portable training tool that allows them to take the less wear and tear. There's a product called, I can't remember it. I don't have it because it's too expensive for me, but, can't remember the name of it, but it's a device where you put them on your legs and it helps you. It's like a massager. It's like, Normatex. That's it. It's a
Normatech.
Normatec. Yeah, Normatec. I'm plugging all these products, but, again, it's for faster recovery. And so the technology and the Aura Ring, lets you know if your sleep is good and, and there's people that take cortisol tests and there's lactate testing to see whether or not you're recovered from your interval or workouts. And like, oh my gosh. I mean, I had a Timex wristwatch for goodness sake. That's all I had. And they've got Garmin's and so, yeah, all this technology is really helping the sport in terms of, the training methodologies and helping kids and athletes recover and work harder and hopefully stay injury free.
So, no, the changes in the sport, it's just quite extraordinary. And we've chatted about your daughter, Katie, and she was a top high school runner, college runner. She ran after college, of course, and you coached her during those early years. And so tell us a little about that, parent coaching a child, there's challenges, we all read about Jakob Ingebrigtsen and his big lawsuit against his father. There stuff goes on. And what was your experience like? And tell us about coaching Katie.
Yeah. When Katie was a little girl, the last thing I wanted her to do is become a runner. So she did everything. She was an Irish dancer. She played rec basketball, but the sport she really loved was soccer. And she was a very good athletic soccer player, left-footed. So she was, left forward, she was wing. And then when junior high happened, she was a little nervous about going to a whole new school. So the cross-country team in junior high started 2 weeks before school started. So she goes, Mom, I think I'm going to run cross country so that way I can make some friends. I'm like, great. That's a great reason to run cross country. And so she ran, she started training with the junior high cross country team and, made some friends and things were great. They go to their first cross country race. And, she's just this tiny little seventh grader. And they run the race and, I could see from afar, she was like in the top 15 and then she kind of was like moving up to top 10 and then top 5 and then they disappear into the woods, right? And they come around and oh my gosh, she comes out of the woods in first place.
Oh my word.
She sprints to the finish line and she raises her arms like she's crossing the finish line of the Boston Marathon. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, Houston, we have a problem because, you know, She felt the thrill of her efforts winning the event. And sometimes in soccer, you could give 110%. And if somebody doesn't show up on your team, it's frustrating. So I knew right then and there, um, she, she was going to keep running. And she did. She ran all through junior high. And then, and then we selected a high school based on the coaches at the high school and the academic level of a high school. So she went to Air Academy High School on the Air Force Academy base. Fantastic experience. The coaches there were fantastic. They let me write the workouts for them and they orchestrated them. So Katie had the experience of having a high school coach on campus, but knowing that the workouts were, propelled by, my own experiences. And so it was just a great marriage of the coaches at Air Academy, myself collaborating, and Katie having that whole fun experience of, letting her running shine. So, yeah. And yes, I did coach her. And there were times where, I'm like, I'd say something stupid or she'd say something stupid. And, we'd get, kind of like irritated with each other. So we came up with a deal. And Katie actually did. Red light, green light. Okay. So when we came home, the green light was we were not supposed to talk about running. Once the workout was over, we'd come home, we'd have dinner, we'd watch a movie, we'd play a game, she'd do her homework or whatever. We were mom and daughter when we walked inside the house. And if I started to say something, forgetting to say something about running, she'd say, red light, mom, red light. And so we just played this game, red light, green light. And so we knew what the boundaries were of when to let her be a kid, when to let her be a student, when to let her be my daughter, and when to let me be my mom, to be the mom. And so for us, that was kind of our tradition.
I love that.
Yeah, I think those simple boundaries, red light, green light, often work the best rather than getting into all sorts of haranguing back and forth stuff.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, we know you got to rush off and coach a bunch of unruly high school kids in a few minutes. We'd like to end with our usual two questions. Since our podcast is called Running State of the Sport, we'd like to ask you, what do you think of the state of the sport? What do you really like that's going on, and maybe what's not as good as it could be?
I love being able to sit in my living room and watch running on television, whether, live stream on TV, the Diamond League or the New World, the New World League with Michael Johnson and, watching NC2As. I just love being a fan of the sport in my living room. Love it. And I think just having the access to the sport is fantastic. I love that part about it. I think, I love the technology of all these gadgets that kids get to have, athletes have access to. I think those are, just revolutionizing the sport. I think those are great things. Things I'm not so happy about. I think we need protections in female sports. When I started, there were no female sports. Then we got Title IX. We had different rules for boys and girls sports growing up for me, and then we leveled out. And there's equal prize money now for females and males in sport, and I want to protect that. I want to protect female sports. So that's something that I think we really need to address. And then the other thing that I think we need to address is the name, image, likeness, and transfer portal in the NCAA. I think that is really changing the landscape of how coaches can recruit, how kids are not getting recruited from the United States. And we're looking at foreign recruits much more heavily, which is denying, the propulsion of creating our own future Olympians. We're creating Olympians for every other country but our own. So I think we really need to address, the percentages of foreign athletes on each of our NCAA teams, how kids are being denied spots on teams because the name, image, likeness fundings. So I think there's some work to be done in that area.
So, Lisa, the final question that we ask all of our guests is we give them 3 fairy godmother wishes, and only 3, and we try to make these as personal as you like, What do you wish for yourself, your family, your friends? What goals you still have? What do you wish for women runners? What do you wish on a grander scale, the world at large? Just take it wherever you want to go.
Sure. Um, for me personally, my biggest wish, and it's personal, is to maintain my mental acuity and wellness. My mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at
Oh,
my age.
oh my.
So it was a 14-year goodbye with my mom, and I am now the age of when she was diagnosed. So that, for me, my wish is that um, I am immune from that, and or we get the medical, um, you know, cure for Alzheimer's. So that's me. That's my personal thing. And it's hard. It's hard because, I live with it every day thinking, oh my gosh, I forgot. What was the name of that thing again? And when I forget something, I'm like, oh, darn. So that's my wish. I also wish, just for continued, both my kids have had some medical things going on, health for them. It's always about, making sure my family is taken care of, and, my husband and my kids are well. And those are my wishes. I don't wish, to ever go back in history. I wish for the future. And so it's basically, my family. I love my family. I love my kids and my grandkids. And, I just wish nothing ever bad happens to them.
Lisa, we wish the same for you and all of your kids. We didn't know your mother's story. Thank you for sharing. I can assure you, based on today's podcast, that you haven't lost a bit of your mental acuity, and I hope that will continue to be true in the future.
Yeah.
And that's it for our podcast conversation today with Lisa Rainsberger, who this year in Boston is celebrating the 40th anniversary of her win in the 1985 Boston Marathon.
Thanks, Lisa, so much. And I look forward. It's been years since we've seen each other, so I look forward to seeing you in Boston. And boy, you haven't lost a step.
Well, thank you. I always tell people, George, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. So, thanks, Amby. Thanks, George. I'll see you both in Boston.
Amby, I thought that was a great conversation with Lisa Rainsberger. She spent a remarkable 40-year running career as a runner, a professional athlete, and as a coach. And she's clearly been a strong, positive influence throughout those 4 decades. So, first off, what stood out for you?
I like some of the funny little episodes and anecdotes from very early in her career as a runner when she really didn't know what she was doing, which of course is true of all of us at the beginning. She said she started running a little bit more when she was at a college camp and put on a couple of pounds, I guess. So she thought, well, maybe I'll put in some miles and take the weight off. She didn't know how far she was going. Doesn't sound like she had a runner's watch or anything. So she carried a rock with her, put it down at the end of the run, and then turned around. And the next day, when she got to that rock, she picked it up, and maybe she went another quarter mile or half mile and put it down. She just kept on doing that until she was hitting 10 miles a day by the end of summer camp, which was pretty darn good. I also think she made some really courageous transitions in her life. I mean, who goes to college on a full swimming scholarship and then gives up that scholarship to start in a sport she barely knows anything about? Lisa did that. And then after she proves that she's good enough in running, so she gets a college track scholarship, she's back on the scholarship wagon, and she gives that up because now she wants to pursue a dream to be a road racer and marathoner. She won the Boston Marathon in the last year when there was absolutely no prize money. She was pretty much a full-out amateur athlete at that point. And I think we all admire those athletes who follow their heart, as Lisa did, rather than scholarships and dollars and materialistic things. George, what stood out for you about Lisa's story?
Yeah, Amby, I listened pretty closely when Lisa talked about coaching her own daughter, who became obviously an elite runner herself. And, this whole parent-child coaching relationship it can be fraught. I mean, you and I on prior podcasts have already talked about the lawsuit of Jakob Ingebrigtsen against his father from the time when he was coaching him. And, sometimes it works, but often, the dynamic is difficult. And Lisa, it really worked out what she described as some very good red light, green light boundaries between the two of them as a parent and a coach. And when they'd get home and they'd have dinner, they'd turn off the running and turn off the coaching. And it seemed really to me like some important, really life lessons in my book. And it obviously had worked, and it was a very successful relationship. And it was great to hear, Amby, that Katie, her daughter, is now pursuing a sports science career in Germany and will soon be working with a top Stanford group, focusing primarily on female sports physiology, a subject she knows well, and where she might be able to make terrific contributions. So, in other words, I took an awful lot away from our talk with Lisa.
And here's hoping that the Rainsberger legacy and continued learnings will go on through Katie, just as her mother has taken us to this point. And so that's it for this week's episode of Running State of the Sport. We hope you enjoyed joining us as much as we enjoyed sharing the time with you. We'll be back again soon with another episode. Until then, please tell your friends about Running State of the Sport. We'd also appreciate a review at your favorite podcast host, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. In signing off, here's our hope for the state of your own personal running. Chin up, clear eyes, full heart, keep moving, onward.